Military training. In May 1942, the new Marines from the Navajo reservations were sent to the Marine Corps Recruit Training Depot in San Diego. For many, the trip marked their first time on a bus. Some had never left the reservation before. Most had never been in a big city. Like most Marines, they struggled to complete the 7 exhausting weeks of training. In some ways, the training course clashed with the Navajo traditions. Many Navajos wore their hair in thick braids, but as Marine recruits, they had to shave off their hair. Marine drill instructors insisted on looking directly into the eyes of recruits, but in the Navajo culture, this is considered rude. Even wearing a military uniform seemed foreign to some of the Navajos. Despite the difficulties, the 29 Navajos completed boot camp and graduated to the next step in their training. They were about to become code talkers. Creating the code. After boot camp, the Navajos were sent to Camp Elliott, a Marine Corps post in Southern California. There, they received training in radio communication and basic electronics. They learned to use, care for, and repair the radios that would send their coded messages. Only at Camp Elliott did it become clear to the Navajos what their special mission would be. Finally, it came time to create the unbreakable code. A Navajo code talker named Chester Nez later recalled how the code came to be. We were told to use our language to come up with words representing each letter from A to Z, he explained. And they also told us to come up with code words for military terms. They put us all in a room to work it out, and at first everyone thought we'd never make it. It seemed impossible because even among ourselves, we didn't agree on all the right words. However, the Navajos devised a code that worked extremely well. They made a list of Navajo words that would represent each letter in the English alphabet. For example, the Navajo word for apple, Bilasana, stood for the letter A. The Navajo word for bear, Shush, stood for the letter B. And the Navajo word for cat, Wasi, stood for the letter C. The code talkers sent messages by using Navajo code words to spell out words in English. For example, to say Navy, code talkers would say the Navajo words that stood for each letter. Neshchi, or not, for N. Wulachi, or ant, for A. Akidiglini, or Victor, for V. And Tsahasi, or Yuka, for Y. Later, the Navajos made the code more difficult to crack by adding more code words. Some English letters could be represented by as many as 3 different Navajo words. For example, for the letter A, code talkers could use Wolachi and Bilasana, apple, or Tsinil, axe. Not all words had to be spelled out letter by letter, however. The code talkers came up with a list of Navajo words or phrases that could be used to represent common military terms. Many of these code words came from the Navajo knowledge of the natural world. Fighter planes flew quickly and made a buzzing noise, so they were given the code name Dahi-Tihi, which is the Navajo word for hummingbird. Dive bombers were named for chicken hawks or Jenny. The bombs they dropped were given the code name Aishi, the Navajo word for eggs. Battleships were called Lotso or whales in Navajo. Submarines were called Hishlo, which translates as iron fish. The code word for the United States was Nihina, which means our mother in Navajo. To start with, the code had about 200 such words. But by the end of the war, it had grown to include about 600 words. The code talkers had to memorize the entire code before being shipped out for active duty. To keep the code secret, no written lists were allowed outside Marine training centers. Code talkers also practiced sending and translating messages quickly. They practiced until they could send and translate a 3-line messages in just 20 seconds. Most important of all, they learned to send and translate messages without errors. The slightest mistake could change the meaning of a message and place troops in danger. Marine Corps leaders were so pleased with the code that they expanded the Code Talker program. From the original 29 Code Talkers, the program grew to include about 400 Navajos